Allow me to introduce Leo Tolstoy's Death of Ivan Ilyich, with a few comments about the nature of modern literature borrowed from a famous French thinker, Alexis de Tocqueville. Tocqueville was concerned with the nature of democratic societies, and he wanted to show how the modern democratic social state had profound effects on our way of life generally. He put forward a theory about the nature of modern literature in democracy. Let us begin with what modern democratic literature will not be concerned with. Tocqueville writes, "One must therefore not expect poetry in democratic peoples to live on legends, to be nourished by traditions and ancient memories, to try to repopulate the universe with supernatural beings in which readers and poets themselves no longer believe, nor to personify coldly virtues and vices that one can see in their own form. Nothing on the model of Homer's Iliad or Odyssey will be produced by modern democratic civilizations. Gods will not fill the earth and intervene in human affairs, showing the nature of justice or politics. Modern literature will not be based on legends or men of superhuman virtue. Think Plutarch's Lives or Sophocles' Oedipus or anything along those scales. Literature will not be about the extraordinary or about human greatness. This is the literature of aristocracy or aristocratic societies, where human inequality is the key to literature. The tendency of modern democratic peoples is to dispel the illusions at the bottom of such aristocratic literature, to be skeptical of direct supernatural claims, as it debunks the aristocratic pretensions or the aristocratic belief in human inequality. Literature will not be based on the supernatural or on inequality in democracies. Tocqueville continues, "Democracy lacks all these resources, but man remains, and he is enough for it. Human destinies, man taken apart from his time and his country and placed before nature and God with his passions, his doubts, his unheard of prosperity, and his incomprehensible miseries, will become the principal and almost unique object of poetry for these people." This is Tocqueville's analysis. Democracies will be concerned with human nature, with man and his miseries, with individuals as they face life's trials, and ultimately the trial that each person faces when death comes knocking, as it inevitably does. Democratic literature will concern ordinary moral dilemmas and how normal individuals struggle with them. Democratic literature is the story of how individuals deal with evil, with suffering, and with success. Democratic literature is in this way closer to common life as lived by any thoughtful human being than aristocratic literature is. Democratic literature asks, what makes human beings happy? Why are human beings miserable? What are the obstacles to a happy life or a happy political community? What is the nature of love? What is the best way to face death? I want to say that this means we all, if Tocqueville is right, and he usually is, be able to relate with the heroes of modern literature in ways we cannot relate to Achilles or Paris. The heroes of modern literature share our human, our all too human concerns. Tocqueville even seems to suggest that modern democratic literature is truer than ancient literature in the sense of reflecting the concerns that should animate human curiosity. Again, let us listen to Tocqueville. He writes, "I have no need to travel through heaven and earth, as he would have to do with Homer and the old literature, to discover a marvelous object full of contrasts, of infinite greatness and pettiness, of profound obscurities and singular clarity, capable of giving birth at once to pity, admiration, scorn, and terror. I have only to consider myself. Man comes from nothing, traverses time, and is going to disappear forever into the bosom of God. One sees him only for a moment, wandering, lost, between the limits of two abysses. End quote. Birth and death, these are the two abysses. Human beings live but a short life in time between them, and they strive, almost always failing, to leave some permanent mark of themselves behind. We admire acts of virtue, we scorn wasted opportunities and vices, we hope for happiness, we regret bad breaks. This is true of me and of you. Why is it true? What is man that remains? What Tocqueville is discussing here, without saying it, is the human soul. Democratic movements, from Marx's attempt to understand the world as a product of modes of production, to some libertarian idealists who also attempt to see the world as purely material, try to deconstruct the soul, to explain away man's dissatisfaction with the present. These movements will always fail because they do not understand the man that remains. Here again, Tocqueville, quote, "Human destinies, man taken apart from his time and country, and placed before nature and God with his passions, doubts, and unheard of prosperity and his incomprehensible miseries, will become the principal and almost unique object of democratic poetry." I want to dwell on this for just another moment. Man knows enough to know that he is lost, or that much of the world around him does not tell him how to live his life. Yet man is not so blessed with knowledge that he knows how to resolve these questions of human destiny, or to explain why he is miserable or joyous. We are neither great knowers nor completely ignorant. This situation will be the inspiration for modern democratic literature. Again, let us listen to Tocqueville. If man were completely ignorant of himself, he would not be poetic, for one cannot depict what one has no idea of. If he saw himself clearly, his imagination would remain idle and would have nothing to add to the picture. But man is uncovered enough to perceive something of himself and veiled enough so that the rest is sunk into impenetrable darkness, into which he plunges constantly and always in vain in order to succeed in grasping himself. End quote. How are we to act in the face of these mysteries? How are we to know, and what does it even mean to know? We also find it pretty convenient to prevent ourselves from thinking about these abysses and our situation, and what they tell us about human life and our condition. We might turn to Facebook or other social media, or work, or sensuality, or video games as means of distracting ourselves from our tension-filled condition. We might think that, eventually, science will help reveal the mysteries of why we don't know completely, or why we aren't completely happy. Perhaps even our doctors will cure us of death, and we will find a way to create life in a test tube. Whatever. All of these are attempts to lie to ourselves about our condition, or attempts to distract ourselves from the reality of our condition. If Tocqueville is right, and he is, democratic literature at its best tries to get us to think about the paradoxical condition of man, between abysses and between knowledge and ignorance. What I am about to say is a horrible overstatement. But perhaps the heroes of modern literature come to suspect that societies in modernity obscure these questions, while the banal villains merely distract themselves from ever thinking about the problems. In some modern literature, that is, we can pity the man who rarely thinks of his mortality or of the gift of his life, and this unthinking man is an object of scorn. Authors can help us to scorn the scornful and pity the pitiful. They can wake us from our distractions that cloud our day and get us to focus on the primordial issues of meaning: birth, death, love. We see this often in movies where directors try to show us the emptiness of our understanding of love, for instance, or to expose us to ourselves as unjust or cowards, or to inspire us with tales of greatness that do not reach too far beyond us. In any event, we see concentration on man as man, especially in modern literature. Nowhere do we see this more than in Russian literature. It would be unjust to the great traditions of Britain, France, and America to say that Russian literature is the quintessential literature of the modern age. But the greatest novelists in Russia, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Solzhenitsyn, are among the greatest novelists ever. And their concerns are these human concerns, give or take a few. They seek to show us that the ways in which modern society makes men happy also makes men miserable, with an emphasis on the miserable. Tolstoy's Death of Ivan Ilyich is in a category of such novels that treat man as man, that treat the question of human happiness and of the regrets one man might have after living a life that was not, in the final analysis, meaningful. In this series of videos, we will look at the parts of Tolstoy's small novel that try to illuminate how the novel discusses the question of what human happiness is and why happiness is so difficult to achieve in the modern world.